Smart objects are the backbone of every good post-production. When we talk about smart objects, we refer to layers like this, which have the content outside the actual project. And that means that if you want to check the original content, you need to double click on the thumbnail and it will open into another file. Now, this is the actual content, and when we close it, we can get the preview in our main file. Why we should have a smart object in the first place? Well, there's pros and cons like for everything, but the biggest pro is that if you resize a smart object, the quality is never degrading, is never changing. Now, we can understand better in this example. We have the same image twice, but one layer is rasterized, which means that is not a smart object, okay, is a bitmap image. And the other one is a smart object, and you can tell because of the small icon here on the bottom right. Now, if I select both of them and I rescale them a lot, and then I go back to the original size, you will see that the rasterized layer lost quality, as you can see, and the smart object is basically exactly like the original one, because we just scale a proxy of it, not the original content. The original content is inside the smart object into another file. So our first good reason to use a smart object is this: you can import images in your post-production file, and maybe you are not sure about their final size, and you can, play around with them and resize them without worry about losing quality. Another reason to use a smart object is that once you modify a layer with the transformations anchors, then if you stop modifying it and you want to go back to it, and you press Ctrl T again, the control points will stay where you left them. And also, once you define a perspective, then the object will always scale in perspective. Another good reason to use smart objects are smart filters. And for example, here I can add a fill blur, which allow me to have some pins in some areas. So I will add some pin here and decrease the blurriness of this shadow, while I want this area to be very blurred. And then I press OK, and then maybe I understand this shadow is too blurry, so I want to get back. Now, if you have a normal layer, you can't get back once you press OK to a filter. But if you have a smart object, then you have smart filters. And smart filters, they have a mask in common. And also you can double click here and you can keep modifying the result as much as you want. Press OK, and then this result will be updated. And you can do that as many times as you want. It doesn't matter. There are some cons about smart object. One con is file sizes, of course. File size depends on the resolution, the amount of pixels, and the amount of informations. Also about the image depth. So if you have, for example, a 32-bit image inside a smart object, that file will be incredibly big probably. And because there is a lot of information hidden in it. Meanwhile, if you rasterize a layer, so if you get out of a smart object, then you will pay only for the amount of pixels that are visible in the post-production file. So, file size is one con. Another con is that if you have a smart object, you cannot paint over it, because actually what you see is a photo of the real content. So if you want to paint inside the smart object, you need to double click and then it will open and you can paint on it if it's not a smart object inside of the smart object, like in this case. But be aware of it. Another con is the fact that if you have a filter, a smart filter in the smart object, and you decide to hide that filter with painting with a mask, then you don't have the ability to paint another mask for another filter. So every filter inside the smart object will share the same mask. But there is a solution for that. If you need, you can do the first smart filters and mask it as you want, and then right click again convert to smart object. So it basically, you have a smart object inside another smart object, and this one will have different smart filters and a different mask. So in the end, how can we create a smart object? There is a couple of ways. First of all, if you have a layer, a normal layer, you can right click on it and click on convert to smart object. And this is the way. This is one way. Now, you need to notice one thing. If you do that, the original file size will be this one. Okay, so this is the size in pixels of the smart object itself, and it makes sense to make a smart object if you are going to rescale this on a smaller scale, not if you increase the size, because if you increase the size, it does not really matter if you have a smart object or not. The number of pixels is defined at the beginning, and just because you have a smart object doesn't mean you can create more pixels, more informations from thin air. Okay, so remember that. The other way to do that is to automatically drag and drop an image from Windows, and if you press enter, then you see this is automatically a smart object. Another way to do so is to go to File and then click on Place Embedded or Place Linked. What's the difference? Now, with Place Embedded, you need to select a file and then press OK. And the smart object will be stored inside the same PSD or PSB. Okay. If you click on Place Linked, it's going to be a smart object, but the actual file is going to be on your hard drive. So if somebody delete that file, your smart object will, of course, disappear, or the content of it will disappear. So be aware of it. Normally what I do is just I go File, Place Embedded, and then once I found, the position I like for and the size I like for, this particular level, if I'm afraid that, the file size will, increase too much, I can just rasterize the layer. So what that means, it means you destroy the smart object and you accept the actual look of your layer. So to do so, you need to right click on the smart object and then click on rasterize layer, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Now, as you may know, with Ctrl J, you can duplicate a layer, and it happens also with smart objects. So I have this smart object and I duplicate it a couple of times. Now, if I go inside one of these, doesn't matter which one, and I modify the image, the original image, I don't know, I just clean it up or something like that, and then I close it and save, then every single layer will be updated because they are all the same. They are different layer, different smart object, but they are linked to the same content, okay? Now, if you want to replace the content of a smart object, you can right-click on a layer and use Relink to File if you want to convert this to a linked smart object, or you can use Replace Content if you want to keep the content embedded in your PSD. Okay, but look at this. If you do that and you take another content, then all of them will change because it's the same link. What if you want to have a smart object but link it to another content, and then keep them these three as they are? You can right click on one of them and use New Smart Object via Copy, and then this one will be not linked to the same image. And if you do this, Replace Content again, and you pick a new one, place, you see only this one is going to change.